Welcome to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Our mission is to bring you discussions on a wide array of topics in the coaching world to grow players on and off the court. You can connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and also reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Now, here's your host, Coach Mike Hernandez.
Welcome back, guys. Thank you so much for joining us on whatever platform you are listening to us on. However you found us, thank you so much for listening to this episode. And as always, thank you for sharing it with others. So greatly appreciate all the support. So hopefully, by the time this episode is released, many of you are either in the home stretch of your season, or depending on what state or area of the world you're in, you might already be in the playoffs of your season. I know that the 2021 season is a bit crazy, but my fingers are crossed that basketball playoffs are happening during or around the release of this episode. And hopefully some of you guys listening are in a position to be in the playoffs and making runs in the playoffs. So with all that in mind, I decided to devote this episode to talk about making a run in the playoffs and just coaching in the playoffs. It's my hope that this episode can help give you some tips or ideas in managing the playoffs, or just hear some great stories and insight from a coach who has navigated that journey. So to help share their insights on coaching through the playoffs, I'm very fortunate to be joined by Coach Kara Bacile. Thanks for joining us, Coach. How are you today?
Hey, I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you for spending some time talking about this. And like I said, I hope that some of the coaches listening are also hopefully navigating some playoff journeys and gearing up for that part of the season. I know it's been a crazy year, but like I said, fingers crossed that so we have some coaches out there who are doing that. So let's go ahead, Coach, and get started with your basketball journey, your coaching journey. Where's the game taking you, and where's your coaching career taking you?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I've been so fortunate. I tell people all the time that, it's crazy where an orange ball can take you in life. And so, I played 4 years varsity basketball here in Richmond, Virginia, at a school called Monacan High School. And, they're always known for being a really successful program, and played for a great coach who, honestly, without him, that's kind of where I got my start in coaching as well, is with him. So I was really, really fortunate with that. And then went on to play Division III basketball at Franklin and Marshall College up in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, which is a really great basketball program, D3. I loved every second of it. I think, Division III athletics is really, you get the best of both worlds. And I think at F&M, I got just that. So I played 4 years at F&M, had an awesome experience. And after graduating, I knew I wanted to kind of at least stay in the game, right? It'd taken me so many places, and it was something I was really passionate about, and it gave me so many opportunities that, you almost feel indebted to it, and you want to be able to give back. So right after graduation, I got on staff at my alma mater, Monacan High School, with Coach Starr. And at that point in time, they were really, really successful team, had the #1 recruit in the nation at the time on their team, Megan Walker, who's now playing for the New York Liberty, went on to play at UConn and all that. But she was kind of the centerpiece of that team. But they had 5 starting collegiate athletes who ended up, playing college.
Yeah.
So they were a deep team, got to meet a lot of coaches that way. Also got to, be with my high school coach and really get into the details of how he does things. And it was such a great learning experience, kind of just seeing it from the other side. Like, I played for him, so what he expects, but
yeah.
It's a lot different when you're working side by side and really going through the details. Like, as a player, you think, coach is playing in this practice because he just wants to make it suck for us. But when you're on the other end, you realize everything's calculated. So really good experience there. And after that year, we won a state title, went 29-1 that year. Won a state championship, and VHSL, Virginia High School League, which is a public school, class 4, won a state title that year. They went on the next year to end up being nationally ranked. But by that point, I was working on my master's degree at the Center for Sport Leadership at Virginia Commonwealth University. And while I was there, I had a graduate assistant position on staff with the University of Richmond women's basketball. So that's the beauty of having 2 really good programs that are so close.
Yeah.
They could work close together. So I was getting my master's at VCU, but working on staff with Coach Schaefer over at University of Richmond. And that, was super eye-opening for me. Really cool experience, especially, being a Division III player myself, going and learning and being on staff at Division I level was really, really cool. And it's just a whole nother animal, right? And getting to learn the ins and outs of recruiting and definitely scouting and a lot of the operation stuff that goes on behind the scenes. So that was a really incredible experience that I was really thankful for. And at the conclusion of that year, I guess it was 2017, 2018, I joined on staff at the Stewart School, which is where I am now. I joined as a varsity assistant, and I was head JV coach at the time. So, we had a really great year that year, and made it to the VISAA, which is the private school leagues in Virginia. Yeah. We're Division II in private school, and we made it to state quarterfinals that year with a really, really young group. And it was really cool to watch them grow from the very beginning. And then from there, that coach that I was working for at the time, she took another opportunity, and, I stepped right on in. And this is my third season as head coach at Stewart School. Love it. It's pretty much had the same group of girls the whole time. I'm really lucky. But last season in 2019, 2020, we were able to finally get over the hump and won ourselves the Division II state championship. So got a really great group of hardworking girls, and they really bought into the system, and really fortunate to be where I'm at right now.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I just thought as you were saying that how fortunate you were to actually sneak in and get that state championship game and play everything. I heard so many stories last year of teams that were just in the playoffs in their state, and then everything got shut down before they had that opportunity. So that's awesome that you did.
We were so fortunate. It was about a week before everything shut down. And so I have a twin sister, and she still coaches. She coaches at a public school in the county. And their team actually did make it to the state title game in Virginia, but the game was canceled. So then they were just co-champions. So we were so fortunate to actually be able to play the game. We had no idea what was about to hit us. But a great lesson for our kids, take advantage of every opportunity you get, because you never know, what's going to happen.
Right. Now, before I get into the questions, I wanted you to give a quick little plug for Division III basketball, because I know as coaches, we always face the battle of players who think like Division I or bust. And sometimes we have to think of these, reasons and arguments to give our players as to why they should consider or be open to opportunities like Division III. So before I get started with my questions, I want you to kind of give your sales pitch that maybe coaches can also kind of learn from and use when they're talking to their players.
Oh, absolutely. I can't say enough about the Division III experience that I had. It was perfect for me. I probably would have been riding the bench somewhere, in Division I, never seeing the floor. So for me, it was an opportunity to play and to actually compete and be on the floor in a small community at a small school and get a really high academics, but still have that structure and be able to compete, which was the biggest thing for me, and be a part of a team, be a part of a family. And it was great. Everybody who says, Division III isn't it, no, it's really competitive. And you got to be able to play to be able to play. And I tell my girls that all the time, don't get caught up in the shiny letters and all that kind of stuff. It's a really good opportunity. And for me, it took me all over. We got to go to Puerto Rico. We went to California. We went to Spain. We went to Portugal. It's not a joke for sure. So it can take you just as many places, as a Division I school can. It can give you those opportunities. It's how hard you go in there and work, and you're going to have to work hard if you're going to earn playing time at the D3 level. So I totally say if you're interested and schools are interested in you, by all means, don't slight it, because it's a really, really good opportunity.
And I like that point that you brought up about the level of play that even happens at the D3 level. I think that as coaches, that could be a good opportunity to take your players to even see Division III basketball and be like, hey, look at the level of basketball that's here. It's not a joke. If schools are interested in you and you have that opportunity, look at how the game is played. It's legit, like you said, for sure.
Oh, absolutely. Even myself, you kind of go in as a freshman, even at the D3 level, thinking, I'm great. I'm going to start right away. And you get humbled really quick because everyone's really good. And no matter what level you're playing at in college, it's a different game.
Sure.
And you got to be able to perform at that level. And there's definitely a level of adjustment. And especially these days, you're starting to see where, you get some of these matchups where even D3 schools are competing, if not beating Division I schools in some cases, which we've seen this year.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's high level basketball. I have friends who've gone and played pro out of Division III. So, I mean, it's just what you make of every opportunity you get. So certainly don't slide it.
Right. Absolutely. 100% agree with that. It's an opportunity. Like you said, like it's an opportunity to play and to keep playing. And so, like you said, if schools are interested in you, like, why not?
Absolutely.
If you have that chance, especially if the alternative is riding the bench somewhere else. I figure
Amen.
if you like playing, then go play, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So before we kind of get into kind of the guts of the topic here of like coaching for the playoffs, I feel that every coach who's been fortunate enough to coach a championship team kind of has that moment during the season, or maybe there's multiple moments where like they kind of realize that they have like something special and there's really something about that team that gives you as a coach confident, like, wow, we could really do something in the playoffs. So for you, when you had your team last year, was there a moment or were there moments where you had that like feeling like, all right, we can do something special with this team?
Yeah, no, I was thinking about that. I think I kind of got two of those moments with our group. So coming into the season that we won the state championship, we had our entire starting lineup was returning. So, you know, I knew I had that group coming back, which was great. So kind of knew what to expect. But our first game that season, very first game of the year, was against an in-town rival who's a bigger school than we are, another local private school. They're tough. They're a really good team. And we had some injuries and we had some kids that were going to be out of town. So I was going to be missing 2 of my top 5 and 3 of my top 6 that day. And I was going to be starting an 8th grader, an 8th grader at the varsity level, because
Sure.
we can do that in private school league. So she was going to start for us. And we were, you know, it was a different look. We didn't have the depth that we normally did. That's for sure. So, I mean, we had a good game plan. It was a game tough the whole way. I was actually going into the game, I was like, man, we'll be lucky if we get out of here with a 10-point loss. Like if we keep it within 10, I'm feeling good about it. And those kids, I mean, they came out, they executed exactly what we wanted to do. And without 2 of our top 5, and one of those actually that was missing ended up being state player of the year. She's committed to going to JMU. So, I mean, that's a big presence of ours that's out of that game. They both, without those guys, starting an 8th grader and a 9th grader, we go in there and play a really, really good team on the road and end up losing by 1. And I remember walking off the court and I'm ticked, right? Because thought we should have won. There were definitely like that game. We had that game. Frustrated because if we had everybody, you know, you're running the what ifs scenario through your head. And their coach came up to me and was like, Coach, you've got a really good team. Like that was impressive. And I kind of stopped for a second and I was like, you're right. That was actually impressive given the circumstances that we're under. Like we can do something with this. So him telling me that, and it really was able to kind of flip the switch in my brain. Like, you know what? We really kind of put ourselves in a position to win when quite honestly, I didn't think we had a chance to win at all. So that first game was really huge. And even though it was a loss, and kind of tipping us over the hump and getting going. And then I guess the second moment throughout the season where I knew we could really do something special was we were playing another rank in our state division. The team was ranked number 1 in the state, and we were going to their place to play on the road and one night. And I mean, they're really good. They got a lot of shooters. They execute really, really well. And we have put a lot of emphasis on defending them and being able to shut down their kids. They have a few like really elite kind of scorers out there. So we put a lot of emphasis on that. And I was kind of, number 1, you worry like, are my girls going to be intimidated? Number 2, are they going to take it seriously? Number 3, are they going to compete? Like, what are they made of? So we get down there on the road and it was a tough environment. Kids were amped up. We were down early, kind of came climbing back towards the end and really closed out the game. I think we were up like 3 with maybe a minute or so left. And, you know, they're pressing and we just executed so well in those moments. And once we beat them on the road, and that was kind of towards the middle of the end of our season, I was like, all right, like we can compete at a really high level when we want to lock in, right? So we can focus, lock in, do what we're supposed to do. We can really compete at a high level. So that at that point, I kind of knew we had something special.
Yeah. And when you're having moments like that, was that something that you kind of let your team know? Did you let them know like, hey, like we could do like something really special here? I guess throughout the season, how do you kind of navigate the like your own belief, like, wow, we can really do a lot with this team versus like, all right, we got to make sure that like we're just stay focused and try and keep things one at a time. So how did you kind of manage that during the season?
Certainly something that I guess I honestly learned more from my high school coach than anyone else was that the power of belief is so it's powerful.
Hmm.
And he always used to be the one that even when, you thought you were going to get blown out by 30, that guy's telling you we're going to kick their butt by 20, right? Like he just had that conviction in him that just made you believe that you were untouchable. And I think that's kind of something that I, in my role as a head coach now, is something that I kind of try and put on our players too, is that, all you got to do is believe in yourself, because, if you put the work in on the back end and you do what you're supposed to do, there's no reason why you can't achieve these goals and beat these really good teams, because you've worked to earn them.
Hmm.
But I think a lot of times, especially with teenage girls, it comes down to confidence. And you got to put confidence, even if sometimes it's not in yourself, in your teammates and everybody else around you. And for us, that's something that we harp on a lot. So certainly, I mean, every game, that's kind of the goal. And after that first game of the year, like I was talking about collegiate, after their coach said that to me, that was the first thing I went in and told my kids. It's like, I know you're feeling down and I know this stinks, but you have to look at the long run. It's not how you start, it's how you finish, right? So
Yeah.
you got to take things and learn from everything that we're doing, because if you can correct some of these little things, which they're correctable,
Hmm.
you're going to have a chance to win and to be really, really successful, because you've shown that you've had the heart and that you can compete. So put those things together and you got a recipe for success. So I think that that's something that no matter who we're playing, where we're playing, our message is always about, growing as a team and
Sure.
getting better every game we play. Because at the end of the day, you want to get to the point where you're peaking at the right time in the season.
Hmm.
And a lot of that has to do with, do you believe in yourself? Do you believe in, the goals and the missions of your team? And if you do, you're really hard to stop.
Yeah. Uh, Belief in just having that belief, and it's such a mental thing, but it means a lot,
Huge.
especially for teenagers, to have their
Yeah.
confidence up and to have that belief up in themselves. Yeah, no, I 100% agree with that. So it's interesting from your perspective because you've seen, playoff basketball at the high school level kind of through multiple different lenses. So when it came to coaching in the playoffs, what are some lessons that you learned? Maybe they could be things that you took from when you played or when you were at the assistant level or at the head level. What are some lessons that you kind of learned that kind of helped you in your coaching journey through your different experiences in the playoffs?
Yeah, I think, the biggest thing I said I've learned and taken away and tried to use in my approach as the playoffs is kind of, simple's best, right? Like stay with what you do really, really well.
Hmm.
And don't try and overcoach the game, right? If you've
It's
been
hard
successful
sometimes, but
all,
yeah,
yeah, no, I know I'm guilty of it. And I have to remind myself of
sure.
that, because especially in those playoff games and you're playing a familiar opponent even, and you want to start tweaking everything you've been doing, and you got to sit back and remind yourself, like, yeah, it's the playoffs, but it's another basketball game. And you've been preparing for this, honestly, the entire season. And for some of those kids throughout their career to be in that moment. And you kind of just have to fall back on what you do really well, and not overcoach and get in the nitty gritty. But, with that said, we do prepare a lot for the teams that we play.
Yeah.
So, we've scouted them, you're watching them, you know what they're doing, and we're going to try and attack those tendencies of those teams. So if you're able to focus and lock in on those details and then execute what you already do really, really well, I think that's really helpful. And then for me, always reminding myself is to try and stay calm, right? Stay in the moment. Don't
Yeah.
start looking down the road, and because it's bite off all you can chew in one day. Focus on the team at hand. Even if your next game might be the next morning, you can't focus on that right now because you got to get through the first, right? So
Yeah.
put all your time and your energy and your focus for one game at a time, and hopefully that works out for the best for you.
And when it comes to putting all that time and putting all of that focus in on that one opponent, the one, whoever is the next opponent that you're going to face. You kind of touched on it with your previous answer. How much scouting, how much preparation do you and your staff put in when it comes to each game? I know it would be a little bit different if you've seen the team before or how often you've seen them, but what kind of level of preparation do you and your staff do, or did they do this past year specifically?
We put in a lot of time.
Mm-hmm.
We're also the kind of team, I think it depends on your team as well. So we're the kind of team also that we're not going to outscore anybody. We just simply don't have the firepower to do it.
Okay. Yeah.
So we've got to defend, right? So our staff put a lot of emphasis on, watching film, going to games and scouting these opponents that we were going to play, and finding out, like, making sure we had their sets, making sure we knew what their tendencies were, who their best player was, leading scorer, all that kind of stuff. Because we wanted to have that knowledge in order for the kids to have that knowledge. And I have a really, really good group of girls that, they're smart, they're going to pick up on it, and they focus on the details. So, for every team that we're playing, and for us, that actually state tournament run was kind of unique in that the team that we ended up playing in the state tournament was from our own conference. So we had played them twice before. Yeah, we played them once in the regular season at their place and lost. Mm-hmm. And then we played them in the conference tournament championship and lost. And then we ended up, playing them a week later in the state championship and finally got their number. But I think that is where the difference in preparation came for us, because we kind of adjust. At that point, we had to take a look at our game plan. And I think my assistant, he said it best to me, because when we played in the first two times, we know who our best defenders are and who we want to put them on. And so I really want my best player on their best player, right? Like, you think that makes sense. And finally we were like, wait, why are we doing that? Because that's not how we've done this all year. Like, we should put our best defender on their best player. And our best player is honestly a great help defender. She blocks a lot of shots. So we put her on kind of more in a help position. So we just tried to full deny, their best player with our best defender, and kind of let our other girl stay out of foul trouble, quite honestly, and play more out of a help defensive situation. But all those little adjustments is hours and hours of film. We clip a lot for the kids. We do a lot of little clips and film sessions. So not watching full game film, but like, look, here's so-and-so's set that we have. And this is how we want to defend it, and all those kind of things. And they'll have a paper scouting report, all that good stuff. Like, we put in a lot of time in that. But with that said, and our kids they're always talking to me like, we need to put in new plays. They know our plays. But for me, I'm like, I don't care if they know our plays, because they still have to stop them. There's a difference between knowing them and stopping them. I can know everybody's plays, but we can't always stop them. So, we work really hard on defending other people's sets, defending any kind of situation that you think is going to be able to come your way. And our kids really, really did a good job of it.
And with all of that preparation that you and your staff did when it came time to the playoffs, did that film kind of directly translate to what they did? Did coaches that you played try to like throw new things or throw new wrinkles at you? I guess my question is, did those opponents that you played kind of stay true to how you played them before, or did they try and do anything different?
I'd say everybody stayed true to who they were. There weren't really a whole lot of wrinkles. A few sets we may or may not have known, but just knowing the tendencies of who was going to be, the main scorer, or who's often used as a decoy kind of things, were able to kind of help us out, at least be able to pick up things a little bit quicker. But I'd say, most of the teams, they stay true to who themselves, and who they were and what they'd done all year long. And so that kind of benefited us.
And for your program, when it came, like you mentioned before, about staying true to who you are, that's really on the defensive side, like really kind of focusing in on defensively, what you were trying to accomplish and what you were trying to do. So when it came to watching that film, was your approach thinking like defensively, what can we put in to, stop their sets, or what type of like press we're gonna put in? What was that sort of process like for you, defensive minded that you are?
For us, more defensively, is how are we gonna put our kids in the best position to be successful on the defensive end? So we have one girl on our team who she is she's an animal on the defensive end. Like I'm going to miss her so much because she's just someone who I'm like, get in her face, don't let her breathe the whole game. And that's all I want you to, you don't have no help responsibility, but I don't want your girl to touch it. And she will just take you out of the game. She can really focus. But playing that way too, you know, it's risky because then you take a man out of help defense. Everybody else has got to be able, you know, to communicate and cover that up. And just different ways, like we know, you know, a lot of teams using screens and who you're guarding. If you need to make sure you get your butt over top of that screen instead of going under because they're going to shoot it every single time. And, you know, we got to drill that over and over. So they when they're in that moment, they already know what's expected of them. And basically we also put a lot of emphasis on keeping people out of the middle. So out of every set, making sure you're forcing people baseline, making sure you keep your feet moving with a high hand, knowing where the help is going. If you get beat, don't ride their hip, let the help come over in the rotation. But all of that is more like cohesion, right? And teams communicating. So that's something that we do all year long. So then when we plug it into our defensive game plan, it's more like, how are we matching people up and giving them jobs to be as successful as we want to be? So like, for example, my young 8th grader, I had her going into the game, literally more as on the defensive end to kind of be a gnat on to their point guard. So she didn't start for me. But I would throw her in there and be like, okay, when you go in, you got 2 or 3 minutes to just pick her up full court and, you know, make her miserable. Make her uncomfortable with the ball in her hand. And then we take her out and we put another girl on her, but just to kind of give different looks at different times of the game too, to kind of keep them on their toes. We just, as many, but like for the 8th grader, for example, like that's what she does really, really well. It is defend as well. And on the ball defense, and she's kind of a little gnat out there. So put her in the best position to be successful when she's on the floor. And I think it does wonders for everybody else.
Yeah. And with that, with all this, you know, preparation that you put in for your opponents, I think that one of the things that coaches always have to balance is how much information do my players need to know versus overloading them with information that makes them think too much. So how did you kind of balance all of this information you got while also just making sure that your players knew what they needed to do and not giving them too much?
Yeah, no, that is something that we always worry about too. Like, how much is too much? Are we overwhelming you? And I think we definitely throw more of the book at you as we get closer and bigger games as well. But I'm really lucky. I have a group that, they're really responsive. They're very cerebral anyways. And so they've even told me, because I've asked, and I'm like, do you like seeing clips or the paper? Like, what's better? And they're like, we like to see it. I know some coaches, they don't like you to see the team that you're playing before you play them because you don't want to get preconceived notions. But for us, it works really well. Our kids like to know what to expect before they're out there. And so that's kind of how we've just been able to operate. They've really adjusted well. And I think just knowing, like, it's not long clips or like that. We'll go 4 or 5 sets. Look through this, or look here. Here's a tendency on their press. This is what's open. Those kind of things. As long as they see it a few times, at least they kind of understand what you're saying, and then kind of are able to apply that within the framework of how we normally operate.
Yeah.
So I think we do a decent job of trying to not overload them, even though I know my brain and my assistants' brains feel super overloaded. Yeah. We try and balance it for those guys.
Yeah, and I know that for me, just personally as a coach, I don't necessarily want my players like thinking so much. I don't want them to be like hesitant or thinking or trying to like go through this encyclopedia of information that they have. Sometimes I just want them to
play,
be instinctual a little bit, or just kind of use knowledge that they have. So you're right. It is a difficult balance. It is a difficult thing to sort of try to find whatever that happy medium is. That's for sure. But I think, and I'll let you speak to it, I think that amount of preparation and giving your players relevant information kind of helps them like kind of feel comfortable, and kind of helps, them kind of stay the course because they sort of know what to expect, or they kind of know what's happening. So do you think that level of like preparation and giving your players like whatever that relevant information is? Did it help them like stay calm? Did it help them stay focused? What was that like during those playoff games in terms of their like emotional and mental focus?
Yeah, I think for us, kind of how we approach all of it is like preparation should bring confidence, right? If you're
Hmm.
prepared for something and you know you've put in the work and you know what you're supposed to be doing, you should be confident in the actions that you're taking, because you know you've put in the work, right? And you know
Hmm.
what you're supposed to be doing. So it kind of becomes a reaction at that point. And so for us, I think it translated to the kids, like they knew what the expectations were. They knew what they were supposed to be doing. And I think it almost kind of gave them a renewed level of confidence in that, hey, we can really do this because we have worked on these things a lot and I can do it in practice and I've done it in other games.
Hmm.
So what's the excuse if I can't do it now? Like we've done it. I just have to do it in this game, right? In order to
Yeah.
get over that hump. But I think it really does bring them more confidence in knowing that they've prepared. And I kind of try and remind them as well. I think it kind of goes to the whole belief things that you prepare more than anyone else, right? That is something special to you and that they can't take away from you. And if you put in a level of preparation in whatever it is you're doing, if it's your academics, you
Hmm.
know, if it's at your job, if it's here on the court, if you put in dedicated time and really work hard in your preparation, results are going to come from that. So you just
Hmm.
have to trust the
Right.
work that you've put in. And I think it really did boost their confidence as we got the ball rolling and moving throughout the playoffs.
Yeah. And with that level of scouting, obviously other coaches did the same to you. When you were going through the playoffs last year, what sort of things did you see that in your mind you're like, oh, like other coaches must have watched filmed on us because they're trying to do this to stop us, and there's always this kind of like chess match that takes place. So what did you have situations like that? Were there things that you saw that other teams purposely were trying to do because of film that they saw on you? What was that experience like?
Yeah, no doubt. I always, you know, we knew other teams are watching you too, right? So you have
Of
to be
course.
prepared for any, yeah. So if I'm doing it, someone else is doing it. So, and I think for our team, like I said, we're not gonna outshoot you.
Sure.
You know, we have one or two kids that I can consistently rely on for double figures. And then after that, let's hope one of the others steps up and gives us a big night. Who is it going to be night tonight? Or at least a few. Give me a few chip-ins. So with that being said, you know, we had a couple people, you know, triangle and two, box and one us, those kind of things. But we were prepared for those. We knew those things were probably going to happen. And like I said, I mean, it didn't drastically change how we were going to approach things on the offensive end, because you know we prepared for it. We'd seen it before in those regards, and how we're defended. And you know they might know our plays, but once again, you got to be able to stop it too. And
Yeah.
I'm also fortunate to have you know some really good players that even if you are completely trying to take them out of the game, they're just those kind of sometimes you got
Hmm.
those special ones that are really hard to get out of sync. So,
Sure.
but foul trouble, that's another one that, you know, you don't see coming all the time. And how do you adjust? Who's going to step up? And how do you then protect the players with fouls? But all those things, you know, all those adjustments, you know, you take them as you can and hopefully the kids respond. And in our case, they did.
Yeah. And with those adjustments, I know that one of the things that makes coaching in the playoffs difficult and a bit stressful is the idea of making in-game adjustments, especially because, you know, it's win or go home sort of mentality. And so you, as a coach, have to balance like sticking to whatever game plan you had versus wanting to make adjustments or wanting to like tinker or do things based on what you see. So when you were going through those games in the playoffs last year, in terms of making in-game adjustments, how much did you find you and your staff having to make adjustments versus, hey, we're just going to stick the course and we're going to see this through?
I'd say there were definitely times, and my assistants are really good at this because if you know one thing goes wrong, I'm quick to be like, oh dang it, like we gotta change this up. And they're always like, chill, like give it another try, like
Yeah.
give them another look. So they're really good at talking me off the cliff. But you know, definitely at some points where we thought we had really good matchups on the defensive end, they weren't good matchups on the defensive end, or we got in foul trouble quick, and then all right, well, we prepared for one person guarding someone who's up next, right? So those kind of adjustments. As far as the offensive end goes, we really stay true to who we are and what we do. Given our kids do have a little bit of freedom out of the sets that we run to create. But at the same time, we didn't really make many adjustments on the offensive end. It was really more defensive focused and working on screens. And if we were really struggling to get over top of screens on shooters, and we really had to kind of scrap the whole fight over, just if it's a good switch. If it's not, hedge really hard and get your butt back.
Yeah.
Those are kind of the few like small things that we would tweak throughout the game. Offensively for us, we just stick to who we are and keep at it.
And speaking of that, of sticking to who you are, when it came to those playoff games, were you running the same five and the same kind of rotations and the same subs? Were things getting mixed and matched a lot? I know that things change depending on foul trouble and things of that nature, but did you kind of have the same group that you were using, or did things get varied at all?
Yeah, I'd say probably the only thing that varied was, as you get closer and closer to that state title game and the games get tighter and tighter, your bench kind of shrinks for you, right? Who you trust on the court in those big moments, it gets fewer and fewer. So I think honestly, we were probably, even in the state title game, we went about 6 deep. We only took one player off the bench coming in to sub in, and those kids, they got to be in shape. You got to know when to call timeouts and not waste them, but also get your kids some air and keep the momentum going. But for us, I think definitely, for me at least, as a coach, when we get tighter in those games, who I feel comfortable on the court, it gets smaller and smaller. So we prepare, but we keep it tight. We keep what we got on the floor.
And everybody on your bench, they were still engaged. They were still supportive. They had no issue. They were good.
100%. Yeah. And these girls are awesome. They are, and they know that. And once again, that's kind of a conversation that we have throughout the year. I'm like, yeah, you've been getting decent minutes from me, but in games like this, if you haven't shown it to me by now, I'm going to go to where my trust lies. And I'm going to ride that trust out.
Sure.
And if somebody's got a hot hand, all right, I'm sticking with them. We're going to move stuff that way for her. And you're not going to be getting as many breaks, I guess, and getting as many opportunities on the floor. And luckily we got a group of girls that they're very, very close. They get along great. And that's another thing that, that we look for and that we harp on our kids is you better be engaged on the bench. Because if you're not engaged on the bench, then I'm certainly never putting you in the game. So they do a great job of giving all their energy and staying engaged and with each other, whether or not it was the best thing for them personally or not.
And having that group and shrinking, and I know I've done that too, and I think a lot of coaches do, it shrinks and shrinks and shrinks the bigger the game sort of gets. And you said you're down to about 6.
Yeah.
With as much emphasis as you do have on defense, what specific principles or things did you emphasize to make sure that your team stayed out of foul trouble? You kind of talked a little bit about a couple things, but I know that's a big concern, is if this is all we're going to roll with, you girls can't get into foul trouble. So what did you kind of emphasize to make sure that they were staying on the court?
Oh yeah, that's huge for us. And I think that kind of goes back to the preparation thing, right? Like that's where we move and practice. We dedicate at least 20 to 30 minutes of a 2-hour practice to just footwork on defense, because our big thing is, you play defense with your feet first,
not your hands.
And a lot of these kids, it's tough. And I know for myself too, it's a hard lesson to learn because you want to reach, you want to get your hands up. But man, we drill them hard in practice you play with your feet, you move your feet, your hands are just kind of the extra, right? If you can get a hand on something, or it's more of a decoy than anything else, but don't you put your hands on anybody. And and it's another thing that we talk about too, is like playing defense with your feet. Not only is it a skill, but it's a want to thing. Like you have to want to do that because it's not easy. It's really hard. So you really kind of have that mentality had kind of been building all year long. And, for those kids, 2 years prior is something that we've, really harped on from the beginning. And it's a mindset that we've kind of been able to develop and really hone in on. That skill itself is just moving your feet and not reaching and not touching.
Yeah.
With that said, of course, you're going to pick up cheap ones here and there every now and then. But I mean, we were able to really avoid significant foul trouble down the stretch in our conference championship game. That was where we had our most foul trouble when, our best player who's going to JMU next year, she had 3 fouls in like the first half. And most of the time, right, she's an experienced player and she had 2. And most of the time I'd yank them if they'd have 2 in the first half. But I was like, she looked at me, she's like, I'm good. And I'm like, yeah, she's smart. She's got this. But, you can't help yourself sometimes, right? Like,
yeah, of course.
it's just however you react. And so at that point, other people got to step up. But definitely for us, it's a footwork thing. Hands are second, feet are first.
And keeping things tighter and tighter as the season goes on and playoffs go on. Say you are just having 5, 6, maybe 7 players that you really, really trust out there. For somebody who is as defensive minded as you are, is that something that you had to consider in terms of like the types of defense that you were putting out there, how much you pressed, how much pressure you put on the ball? Or did you just say, hey, like, I trust you and we're going to go out there and we're going to do this and you better be in shape to make it happen? What was that like?
Yeah, I mean, certainly we have to, that's why I tell them all the time when we got to run and practice. I'm like, y'all, you think this is punishment, but it's got to happen because you've got to be able to, withstand these things. So we try and make sure that we're in as best shape as we can be in, especially down the stretch and have those legs as well. Not just your air, but your legs. But certainly the kind of defense we play, we are about as bland as you get. And that was kind of our purpose, was like, we're going to focus on one defense and we're going to get it right. And we're going to make sure we do it perfect. And half court man-to-man, we knew if we could, really get down our half court man-to-man really well, then it could cause problems for people. Here and there, if we got down and it was late in the game, we'd throw on the full court press. I don't think throughout the playoff runs we showed any of our zones. I think that kind of goes back to like we stuck with what we were really good at, and we knew that was our half court man. And so we were like, we'll put all our emphasis on this and we're going to live and die by it. And we're not going to, because there definitely were times where I was like, man, and we've played this team twice. Like, what if we show them our zone this time and see what they got? Like, it's a game. Like, you're as a coach, you're thinking, oh, this could be a good move, but it's also a gamble. And for me, it was kind of like, stay true to who you are, know what you do really, really well, and do it well.
Right.
And so we stayed half court man to man the entire playoff run.
Yeah. And I know for me personally, I've had a couple teams that I coach at the middle school level who've won championships. I've been really fortunate to have that. And one of my philosophies with that is I didn't want to outcoach myself.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of the situation you run in. Like, I don't want to beat myself by like coaching and doing something just to like do it. And like, why did I do that even in the first place? Like, what was this for? Like,
I feel like that's my internal battle all the time.
Right. But it is hard because you don't, and I guess we can kind of get into it now. I was going to talk about it later, but we're here now. So for you, in terms of emotionally and mentally, what was that journey like where no coach wants to be like, feel like they're the reason that a team loses? So they have to kind of balance that pressure where, okay, I'm going to keep even keel and I'm going to, do what I need to do. And I'm going to be the calm force on the bench and we're going to make this happen. So when you're going through those playoff games for you personally, in terms of your own emotional and mental stability, for a lack of a better term, what was that journey like for you to make sure that you were the best coach that you could be?
Yeah, no, I think I'm someone who's really anxious to begin with. So I was just at a whole nother level going through the playoffs. And I like to, joke too that, so we played in that conference championship game and lost to Nansman Suffolk. And I feel like I didn't sleep the entire next week because that whole next week was states. And I just put so much, not only was it just like, oh, all this stuff that I could have done better, but then you start preparing for every single game you got. And I think that's where I really just threw myself into, is just like prepare as best you can. And if you've known you prepared as best as you can and prepared your team as best as you can, then that's the best you can do, right? Then all else, it takes luck too sometimes, right? So
Sure.
ball's got to bounce the right way. So I think I just really threw myself more into like preparing myself and preparing my kids as best that I can. And then you got to live with it. But I also know for me personally, like if we're riding to a game, I'm listening to like low key music. Like I'm not listening to that hype music because I know it's just going to get me all antsy. Like I've got to relax and kind of get my mind straight before those games, because you want to be that calming presence, kind of be that force of stability during a time where it gets really crazy out there, which I know I am not always, but I do try to be. So you certainly never want to feel like you've let them down. And so I think, preparing as well as you can is the best that you can do. And then, man, you just pray you don't let anybody down. But I certainly, you go through all the end of game situations in your mind. We walked through several like end of game plays. Like, what if this happens? What if there's 5 seconds left on the clock and we got to hit a 3? Kind of just using, 5 minutes at the end of practice just to even walk through those kind of plays. So then you have them in your head. When you draw them up, at least they've seen it before and they've run it before. Doesn't mean it'll, work perfectly, but there's some form of recognition there. So just trying to prepare in small ways like that to hopefully be able to get over the hump if you need to.
Stay as prepared as best you can. It might calm you down a little bit just to have all that, but it's difficult, of course.
It is.
And even if you've been through it a couple times, it's still like, you still get a little worked up over it for sure.
Oh yeah.
I like the idea of calm music. I try to do that too. I don't need too much to amp me up, especially.
Exactly. I'm always like, settle yourself down, girl.
Yeah.
It's too much.
Yeah. Going back to, you talked about your half court man to man, and that's pretty much what you stuck with. So I wanted to just kind of touch on that. What was the most important, like, foundational piece for that defense to be successful?
I'd say communication. Aside from like all the technical pieces, for us, it's communication, because we like to say we were playing a team defense. So it's not me stop my man, it's we stop them. So if you get beat, we want you to get beat, right? Like I don't want you riding somebody's hip to the basket and picking up a cheap foul. We can't afford it. So if you get beat, get beat. And you got to know and trust and believe that your teammate is going to be there and help. But all of that's communication. And so that's something that we really harp on every day, is just purposeful communication on the floor and playing as a team on the defensive end. Because I think when you do that and you're working more as a unit on the defensive end, instead of I got mine, you got yours, you're a much, much harder team to penetrate and get open shots, because you can cover a lot more ground if you're communicating about what is going on and where it's going on. So I definitely say communication is a big piece. And the second piece for us is, of course, play with your feet first. No cheap fouls. We also want to send everybody baseline. We want to keep the ball out of the middle of the floor and in the paint as few as possible. We want it outside. We want it out wide. So kind of just really, really drilling and harping on keep everything, pushed to the side and feet first.
Yeah. You mentioned communication, and I think every coach who I've ever talked to has said that my team doesn't communicate enough. So I'm gonna ask you what do you do? What do you do in practice? What do you emphasize with your team? I guess, how do you get your team to communicate? And it sounds like they probably still don't communicate enough for your liking.
I'm telling you, it's a constant battle. And, even when we do it really well, I don't think it's good enough, right? Because I always think you can be communicating more. But I think a lot of it goes to, the chemistry of your team and the trust of your team. And for us, at least in that point, we've been playing, those girls have been playing together, last year when we won, pretty much three years in a row. And they're getting used to each other on the court. And with that familiarity brings the confidence to speak with each other. Because I think communication also goes back to confidence. Like they don't want to say the wrong thing. They don't want to be heard necessarily all the time. They just want to do it. But you got to be confident in it. And for us, it is something, that we harp on daily. And if they're not talking, and, especially if we're doing defensive drills and that gym is quiet, we run them. That's just kind of our way to at least emphasize, like, I know y'all don't like to run. We need to run because you need to be in good shape. So if y'all ain't gonna talk, then that's when I'll make you run.
Yeah.
Because that's how important that we think that communication is. So, and especially these days, we got kids in practice wearing masks and I'm yelling at them to talk too. They just really hate me, but
Yeah.
I do. It's hard. And that's what I tell them too, is that it's really hard to do and to make yourself do, especially if you're winded and all those kind of things. But the details, all those things, that's what makes you great. So if you're committed to being great, then that's a non-negotiable. You got to communicate in order to be on the floor. So that's kind of the standard, and they know that. And we've gotten a lot better. Always room for growth there.
Yeah, no, always room to get better, especially if communication. But
Oh,
I think if it's something that, like you mentioned, that you consistently like harp on and like don't let up on, I think it helps. And I know for me as a coach, I sometimes think that, or used to think that, like communication would just be like something you would naturally do,
Yeah.
but it doesn't come naturally. Like you do have to emphasize it. You can't just assume, especially if something like that. But like you mentioned in your case, if it is something that you are continually emphasizing and continually correcting, then hopefully then the message gets through, which it sounds like it definitely did, at least in some part, for sure.
And that's the thing too. I think, with them, it starts at the top too. So I can sit there and preach all day about communicating, but that means that I also, and my staff, we have to be able to bring the energy, and we have to be communicating our practice, right? Like there should never be a time where I'm just sitting there, arms crossed, not talking and just watching. Like maybe if we're doing some sets for a few seconds, but most of the time I'm trying to make a conscious effort to cheer someone on, to fix something, as long as there's some kind of communication. And if it gets quiet in that gym, it's on me, it's on them, and then ultimately it's on the kids to get that communication up. But I think it starts at the top. I want them to kind of emulate how we go about things, so they're kind of stepping into that culture.
Yeah. So, Coach, take us to that championship game. Take us to that final game that you played last year. I think you mentioned before as a team that you had played before, so you've seen them a couple times. So, in that game, did things go the way that you prepared for? Were there some curveballs that were thrown your way? What was the situation, and how did things go during that game? If you can take us back to that day.
I'll tell you, it really kind of came as a shock to me, because I think the first quarter and the first few minutes were the best few minutes that we had played all year. Like we really came out the gates hard and fast and confident. And we were just able to jump on them really, really fast. So, I mean, at halftime, I believe we were up about 15 or so. Like we really came out the gate strong. So, that was kind of my curveball, because even though you feel good because you're doing really well, I knew that team were not going to lay down and die. They were going to adjust, and they were definitely going to come storming back. And I also knew that we probably weren't going to stay as hot as we were in the first half and the second half. So that was kind of more the message going into halftime, was like, yeah, that was really great, but we got a whole half of basketball left to play. And in big games like that, you can't take anything for granted. So we really was kind of, trying to keep the foot on the gas, and we knew that we had to be prepared and mentally tough enough to kind of, weather their runs, because they were going to make runs. They were going to get it close. And I think they got as close as 6 or 8 at one point. I mean, they did. They came storming back. Give them credit. They're a really good team. And we knew they were going to. And that was, kind of the message was, we're going to have to weather their storm and not get intimidated, and continue to do what you do really well in order to hang on to that lead and finish the game out strong. So that was definitely my curveball, which is a good and bad curveball to have, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I think that it's a really good message though, to like tell your players like, hey, like they're coming back. Like we haven't won anything yet. They're gonna like do something different. Like, and that's okay. Like that's fine, but let's just like keep zeroed in and keep focused in. So with that, in that situation where they cut the lead down to, I think you said it got down to 6 at that point, for you as a coach, are you thinking in your mind like, okay, like I said they were going to make a run and they made a run, so it is what it is, or like alarms going off in your head, like what's happening at that point?
I think at that point I'm like, oh my gosh, here we are. Like I told you guys so. I knew this was coming. That's kind of what's definitely going through your head. And that's kind of where I start reminding myself and my coaches, like, we knew they were going to come back. We've got to finish. And that comes back to your execution and your confidence in your execution in those last final minutes and what they're doing. So no doubt, I was definitely starting to sweat it a little bit. I feel like you never feel comfortable, especially in a game like that. Like, you never feel like you've got it won. I don't think I felt like we had it won until the time ran off the clock. So, you just keep chugging ahead. And that was kind of the message, was like, how do you respond when things suddenly aren't going really well? Like, it was going really well and we're all hype and the game's, it's great. But how do you respond when it doesn't go really well? Because that's coming up soon.
Yeah.
And our kids, they were phenomenal. They responded like things weren't going our way, and they still found a way to, really push through and make sure they finished the job.
And it sounds like they didn't really get like too rattled, or they
didn't. And, I think some of my younger ones were kind of feeling, the jitters a little bit. We started making, a few turnovers we normally wouldn't have made. But at that point, that's where your job as a coach is to help settle down and then re-give that confidence to them that everything is cool, right? Like, stay with what you've been doing. Don't just because they're getting hot doesn't mean that you're not, right? Like, keep firing, keep at it. So.
Yeah, no, 100%. No, I like that you can catch hot again too, and start making shots. Yeah. Speaking of curveballs, I'm gonna throw a little bit of a curveball at you, because I was thinking about this as you were kind of going over some things. For this current season, you have, players, I don't know how much playing time some of them got, but you have, I'm sure, players who returned from that team last year.
I didn't lose a single player. Single one.
So with that, now what? Now what's the message now that they've already hit this peak, to keep going and like be as focused and be as sharp as they were before?
I think that has been our biggest challenge this year with those kids, because they achieved what they wanted to achieve, and they know that they can do it. And I think the biggest thing that you can face is being comfortable. Like, the biggest threat to your team and your success is getting comfortable. And I think, that's where we kind of started the year off, is that we're really comfortable, with what we've done. And they say, oh yeah, we want to win another state championship. Well, you're not, if you're not going to step it up. Right. And so that's kind of been our biggest message, is you can't be comfortable. You can't be content, because now the target is on your back. And yes, I know this exact same group of girls did it last year, but guess what? If 2020 taught us nothing else, nothing is guaranteed, right? So you have to continue to work and focus in on those details, and you can't take them for granted, because if you do, you may not get the opportunity again, or when you do, you're not going to execute at a high level because you're not as hungry, right? So how do we keep you hungry and not feeling content and comfortable? Because like I said, we do focus a lot on the details. So a lot of the things that we do in practice are, it's a lot of the same every day, or, a mix up of drills that are very, very similar, because we want to make sure that, we're getting the reps, that enough reps in that, so that we're, ready to go and ready to perform without having to think about it. And so, it's easy to start going through the motions, and what to expect from coach, what's to expect from your teammates. Well, the minute you let your guard down is when somebody else is getting ahead of you, right? And when someone else is outworking you. And I think, we were able to make our living and get our wins from putting in the preparation and staying hungry. So, now it's making sure we stay hungry and not get comfortable.
Yeah, I told my players from both the teams that won the championships at the middle school level, I actually left the programs each time after we won, but I told the players who were going to still be on that team, it was like the 7th graders, I said, you're going to get everybody's best shot, and everyone, if they do beat you, are going to brag about beating you. Like, it's going to be a status thing. So I did a lot of appeal to their ego, I remember.
Absolutely.
That's how it's going to, like, they're all going to go on, Instagram or Snapchat saying that they beat you, and they didn't like that.
That's why I said, like, we started off we want to prove people wrong, right? Well, you've proven yourself now, but can you maintain it? Like, that's your next challenge, because now everybody knows who you are. So you better make sure they remember.
Sure. Okay. So before we hit our concluding segment, I want you to pretend like you're speaking to a coach who might be going to the playoffs for the first time, coaching through the playoffs for the first time, and they just need some words of wisdom. Because like I said, maybe by the time this episode gets released, some of you listening might be in that position. So Coach, if you had that coach in front of you and you just had to give them some words of wisdom, what would you tell them?
I'd say trust your gut, truly stay true to who you are. Don't outcoach yourself or overcoach the game. Trust your gut, go with your gut, and fall back on your preparation and try and stay calm, because that's the advice I got to give myself all the time, is try and stay calm. Because if you're in control, or at least you feel or project that you're in control, they're going to feel the same way. Your kids are going to take the energy that you give off. So be confident, trust yourself, trust your judgment, and trust your gut.
Sometimes easier said than done.
No,
I think that is what I think. Those are good words of wisdom.
I can say the right things, but I got to remind myself too.
Yeah, it's like, I want to trust my gut, but then my stomach is in knots. So then
exactly.
But but what you do bring up is a good point. Like whatever you did as a coach got you to that point, so you know what you're doing. Like you know who you are, you know what you're doing,
right.
and again, I think that kind of ties back to what we talked about earlier, where if you coached and you did things a certain way that got you to the playoffs, and then you try doing something different and it doesn't work out, it's going to be a lot of reflection you're going to be doing, I think, as to
why like you're kicking yourself in the butt after that.
Right. And of course you do want to prepare, and of course you want to, know what the other team is doing, but you would hate, like we talked about, you'd hate to be in a losing situation because you as a coach thought that you like overcoached, or like you tried to like do too much and you coached yourself out of the game. So I think it's easier to kind of live with yourself as a coach, at least for me personally, if I know that I stuck with what I did and it like didn't work out, versus like I tried to blow everything up and it didn't work out. Well, of course it didn't work out because I blew everything up,
like,
right?
What were you thinking?
Yeah. So yeah, I like that. Trust your judgment, trust your gut. You got there for a reason. So
amen.
Believe in that. Exactly. So to wrap up, Coach, there's a couple questions I ask every guest. This first one, what is a coaching moment? It could be from anywhere in your coaching career, but what is a coaching moment of yours that you think others listening would be able to learn from?
I was thinking about that, and I honestly think it goes back to this past season, the one that we're touching on right now, the championship season, is really too. I think I really did honestly learn to trust my gut in that situation, because the year before we had been in the playoffs, and that was truly my first time as a head coach coaching my team through the playoffs. And you're right, you're jittery. You think you need to make something up. You think you need to really come up with a genius idea to beat these teams, and you start putting a lot of pressure on yourself. And I think I really did learn this year to fall back, trust your gut, listen to what you do best. And I think at the end of the day, if you truly just try and put the kids in the best position for them to individually each be successful individually, then you're putting your team in a really good chance to be successful in the long run. So I think to kind of step back and look at it that way, like where can I put these guys, and in what positions can I put them in on the floor that's going to make them confident, make them feel comfortable, give them a really good purpose, and ultimately lead them to be successful.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of my best lesson that I got.
Well, you bring up a good point too, and I was thinking about that as you were talking about like your half court man, and that's kind of what you stick through. And we talk about like the pressure and everything that kind of happens with the playoffs, and for us as coaches, there's definitely a lot with players too. And so if players are really comfortable, right, doing like their half court man, and all of a sudden like coach told me to do like a 2-3, like as a player, I might be like, oh no, like when's the last time I did this 2-3? Am I doing this right?
What if I do this wrong?
Yeah. And then you almost might be putting undue pressure on your players, and they might not be able to just like go play because they might be doing something that's new to them, and they might be a little hesitant. They might be nervous about it. Whereas in your case, like you mentioned, they're doing half court man. Well, okay, we've been doing half court man this whole time. I don't have to like think about that. Like I just know
right.
I can just go play. Right. So
exactly.
Yeah. Not making things too complex,
right,
if possible.
Simple.
Simple's always better, for sure. Great. So to wrap up, I give every guest what I call a 60-second soapbox, basically your opportunity to get out like your final message, final thought, your closing idea that you want to leave the listeners with. So Coach, I'm going to go ahead and give you that floor. So take it away.
Gosh, I guess my 60-second soapbox would be for me being a coach. a woman in the profession and coaching young women is to really invest in these young women, and especially, grow the game. Do what you can to give back to the game. Do what you can to inspire young women, and encourage them to stick with the sport or to stick with sport in general. But I think ultimately sports and for me, with my bias, basketball, it can be such a vehicle for these kids, and at the high school level, especially. For us, it's a way to get people and put them in better positions in their lives. It gives them the opportunity to learn lessons that they're not necessarily learning in the classroom. It's setting them up for a future. So don't just look at it as just a hobby for yourself, or intrinsically you want to get the best out of your teams. Like, remember the bigger purpose. And I think especially for women in sports, it's important to grow the game because it's still a little bit behind. Our numbers have just across the country, and not as many females, especially playing in basketball right now. Generate the interest, get them out there, start them out there young, reach out and get your teams involved with younger teams. Do what you can to give back to the game of basketball because, like I said, it's been really good to me and probably to most of you listening, because that's probably why you're listening. So do what you can to give back. Let's grow the game and let's get more women out there, more female leaders. Give them confidence to do the best they can and anywhere they go in life.
Yeah, love it. I mean, I'm somebody who's coached girls many years now. Like I'm all about it. And like you said, I think that it's great to also empower girls and women to be out there and coaching, especially of sport like basketball. And I know for me personally, I would love for any of my like former players to get into coaching and give back that way, something they're interested in. So awesome. Love it. And that is a great thought to leave at. So Coach Bacile, I want to thank you for spending some time talking about your coaching, talk about the playoffs, talking about everything that went through navigating that run of yours. It was a great conversation. Good luck, and hope you have the opportunity to do it again this year. So good luck.
Hey, thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me on. It was a blast. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you to all of you who listen. This was another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. We'll see you guys next time.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Make sure to connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, or reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Take care, be safe, and we'll see you next time.